Black waitress asks to play for a tip. Billionaire laughs, unaware she's a violin prodigy. What if a single moment could change everything you thought you knew about someone? Jasmine wiped down the last table at Romano's Italian bistro, her shoulders aching from another 12-hour shift. The restaurant had emptied except for one man in an expensive suit, still nursing his wine at table 7. At 28, she'd been serving tables for 6 years, saving every penny while her violin case gathered dust in her tiny apartment closet. The case held more than just an instrument. It held dreams she'd packed away after her scholarship fell through and her grandmother's medical bills consumed everything. She glanced at the customer's untouched tiramisu and noticed his wedding ring catching the dim light. He looked tired, the kind of tired that money couldn't fix. Something about his posture reminded her of her late grandfather, who used to say music could heal any wounded soul. Little did she know, this stranger would soon discover a truth that would shake both their worlds forever. "Where are you watching from tonight?" The man at table 7 was Michael Thompson, and at 42, he owned half the restaurants in downtown Chicago. His net worth exceeded most people's wildest dreams, but tonight felt like the longest of his life. The divorce papers sat folded in his jacket pocket, signed just hours ago. 20 years of marriage ended with the stroke of a pen. His wife had taken their daughter across the country, claiming he cared more about business deals than family dinners. Jasmine approached his table with practiced courtesy. "Can I get you anything else, sir? Maybe some coffee?" Her voice carried a warmth that cut through his numbness. Up close, Michael noticed her calloused fingertips, unusual for a waitress, and the way she moved with unexpected grace. "Actually," he said, his voice rougher than intended, "keep me company for a minute. This place is yours now, isn't it? Everyone else has gone home." Jasmine hesitated, then sat across from him. "Long day." Michael laughed bitterly. "Long life, more like it. You ever feel like you're successful at everything except the things that actually matter?" He studied her face, surprised by his own openness to a stranger. "Every day," she admitted. "I'm working 3 jobs to support my sick grandmother, and sometimes I wonder if I'm just surviving instead of living." She paused, then added quietly, "I used to play music. Before life got in the way." "What kind of music?" "Classical violin. I had dreams of performing with symphonies, maybe teaching at a conservatory someday." Her eyes grew distant. "But dreams don't pay medical bills." Michael felt something stir in his chest. Recognition, maybe. "I used to paint," he confessed. "Wanted to open my own gallery before I inherited my father's restaurant empire. Funny how we end up so far from where we started." The restaurant's silence stretched between them, comfortable somehow. Outside, Chicago's skyline glittered like scattered diamonds, but inside this small space, 2 strangers shared the weight of abandoned dreams. "You know what's crazy?" Jasmine said, standing to clear his untouched dessert. "Sometimes I hear music in everything. The coffee machine's hiss sounds like a violin's tremolo, the ice maker clicks like a metronome. It's like my old life is haunting me." Michael watched her stack plates with the same precision a conductor might use to arrange sheet music. "Why don't you play anymore?" "Can't afford to rent practice space, and my apartment's too thin-walled for neighbors." She shrugged, but he caught the pain she tried to hide. Besides, who has time for dreams when survival takes 18 hours a day? As if on cue, her phone buzzed with a text from the nursing home. Another emergency. Her grandmother's condition had worsened again, and the bills were mounting faster than she could work. Michael noticed her face pale as she read the message. "Bad news." "My grandmother," she whispered, her composure finally cracking. "She's all I have left, and I'm failing her." In that moment, something shifted in the empty restaurant. 2 broken souls had found each other, but neither knew that this chance meeting would soon reveal secrets that would change everything. Michael watched Jasmine's hands tremble as she clutched her phone, and something deep inside him awakened, a protective instinct he'd forgotten he possessed. "How much do you need?" he asked quietly. Jasmine's eyes widened. "I wasn't asking for." I know you weren't. But how much? 15,000 for the experimental treatment, she whispered. It's her only chance, but insurance won't cover it. The doctors say without it. She couldn't finish the sentence. Michael reached for his wallet, but Jasmine stepped back. I don't take charity. I work for what I need. Then work for it. The words came out before he'd fully formed the thought. You said you play violin. Play for me. One song, and I'll pay you $15,000 as a tip. Jasmine stared at him like he'd lost his mind. You can't be serious. Dead serious. There's just one condition, it has to be from memory. No sheet music. The cruel irony wasn't lost on her. She hadn't touched her violin in 3 months, terrified that her skills had deteriorated beyond repair. Her grandmother's old violin, a beautiful 19th-century instrument worth more than Jasmine made in 2 years, sat locked away like a guilty secret. I don't have my violin here, she said, grasping for reasons to refuse. I'll wait while you get it. 20 minutes later, Jasmine returned with a worn leather case, her heart hammering against her ribs. The restaurant's overhead lights felt like spotlights as she opened the case with reverent hands. The violin gleamed like honey under the warm bulbs, its wood bearing the loving polish of generations of musicians. Michael leaned back in his chair, expecting pleasant background music, the kind of performance you'd hear in a hotel lobby or elevator. He'd made this impulsive offer partly from pity, partly from loneliness, never imagining what was about to unfold. Jasmine lifted the violin to her shoulder, and her entire demeanor transformed. The exhausted waitress disappeared, replaced by someone who belonged on concert stages. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began Pachelbel's Canon in D, a piece she'd performed at her conservatory audition 7 years ago. The first note hung in the air like crystallized starlight. Michael's wine glass stopped halfway to his lips. This wasn't hotel lobby music. This was something transcendent, something that belonged in Carnegie Hall. Each note flowed into the next with mathematical precision yet emotional depth that made his chest tighten. Her vibrato was flawless, her intonation perfect, and the way she swayed with the melody suggested someone who didn't just play music, she spoke it fluently. As the piece built to its crescendo, Michael realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. This young woman, who served him tiramisu and worried about medical bills, possessed a gift that most people could only dream of experiencing, let alone creating. When the final note faded into silence, the restaurant felt different, sanctified somehow, as if they'd both attended a private church service. Michael sat in stunned silence, his preconceptions crumbling like ancient walls. This wasn't just a waitress who happened to play violin. This was an artist disguised by circumstance, a musical genius hidden behind an apron and tired smile. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. But the story was far from over. As Jasmine lowered her violin, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the kitchen doorway, someone who would soon reveal a connection that would change everything they thought they knew about fate, family, and second chances. Michael stood slowly, his hands shaking as he reached for his checkbook. That was... He struggled for words. How long since you've played professionally? 7 years, Jasmine whispered, carefully placing her violin back in its case. Not since my audition at Juilliard. Juilliard. Michael's pen froze above the check. What happened? The question opened a floodgate Jasmine had kept sealed for years. I got in. Full scholarship. But the week before classes started, my grandmother had her first stroke. She'd raised me since I was 10, after my parents died in a car accident. I couldn't leave her alone in Chicago with no family, no support system. She sat down heavily, the weight of those old decisions crushing her shoulders. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd reapply the next year, or the year after. But life had other plans. Medical bills, 3 jobs, watching her slowly forget who I am. There's no time for dreams when someone you love is disappearing piece by piece. Michael finished writing the check with trembling hands, but he couldn't bring himself to tear it out. Jasmine, what's your last name? Chen. Why? The name hit him like a physical blow. He gripped the edge of the table, his face draining of color. Jasmine Chen. Your grandmother, is her name Rose Chen? How could you possibly know that? Jasmine's voice was barely a whisper. Michael's voice cracked as he spoke. 35 years ago, a young violinist named Rose Chen played at my parents' anniversary party. She was the most beautiful musician I'd ever heard, and she was dating my older brother, James. They were planning to marry after she finished at the New York Philharmonic. Jasmine's hands flew to her mouth. Her grandmother had mentioned a James Thompson decades ago, the love of her life who'd died in Vietnam just months before their wedding. She'd never remarried, never played professionally again. The grief had silenced her music forever. James never came home from the war, Michael continued, tears streaming down his face. Rose disappeared after the funeral. My family tried to find her for years, but she'd vanished completely. We never knew what happened to her. She was pregnant, Jasmine said quietly. My father was James's son. She changed her last name, moved across the country to start over. She was too heartbroken to stay connected to anything that reminded her of him. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath as the weight of this revelation settled between them. Michael wasn't just a wealthy stranger offering charity, he was family. The uncle she'd never known she had, searching for a grandmother who'd been hiding in plain sight just across the city. She talks about James sometimes, Jasmine continued, her voice breaking. When the dementia lets her remember the good times. She still calls his name in her sleep. Michael buried his face in his hands. She's been here all along. We've been here all along, and we never found each other. The cruelty of it all threatened to overwhelm them both. Decades of separation, of struggling alone when they could have been family. Jasmine's sacrifices, her abandoned dreams, her grandmother's slow fade into darkness. All of it happening just miles away from people who would have moved mountains to help. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. As they sat in the ruins of their old assumptions, neither noticed that tomorrow would bring a discovery that would honor the past while finally, impossibly, offering them both a chance at the future they'd thought was lost forever. The next morning, Michael stood outside Sunset Manor Nursing Home, holding a photograph that had lived on his mantle for 35 years. It showed James in his army uniform, arm around a radiant young woman with a violin case at her feet, Rose Chen at 19, before grief rewrote her story. Jasmine met him at the entrance, her eyes red from a sleepless night of processing the impossible truth. She has good days and bad days, she warned. Today might not be a good day for surprises. Rose sat by the window in her wheelchair, staring at nothing with the vacant expression that had become too familiar. At 74, she was still beautiful, but dementia had stolen most of her memories, leaving only fragments of the brilliant musician she'd once been. "Grandma," Jasmine said gently, kneeling beside the wheelchair. "I brought someone to meet you." Michael approached slowly, his heart hammering. "Hello, Rose. I'm Michael Thompson. James was my brother." For a moment, nothing changed. Then Rose's eyes flickered with recognition, not of Michael, but of the name she'd whispered in dreams for decades. "James," she whispered. "James's little brother," Michael said, sitting down across from her. "He talked about you constantly. Said you played violin like an angel." Rose's hand went to her throat, where she still wore a simple gold locket James had given her. "James loved music," she said clearly, her voice suddenly stronger. "He said it was the language God spoke when words weren't enough." Michael pulled out the photograph with trembling hands. "Do you remember this day?" Rose took the picture, and tears began streaming down her face. "Our anniversary party. He proposed that night." Her clarity was startling, as if the photo had unlocked a door that dementia had sealed shut. "He wanted to marry you after the war," Michael said. "He wrote to us about wedding plans, about the future you'd build together." "I was going to play at our wedding," Rose whispered. "Pachelbel's Canon in D. It was his favorite piece." Jasmine's breath caught. She'd chosen that piece last night instinctively, drawn to it by some invisible thread she couldn't name. "Grandma, I played that song yesterday. For the first time in months." Rose looked up at her granddaughter with sudden, piercing awareness. "You have his eyes," she said to Michael. "And her hands," she added, touching Jasmine's fingers. "Music hands. They run in families." Michael felt tears streaming down his face. "Rose, I want to ask you something. Jasmine has a gift, the same gift you had. She gave up Juilliard to take care of you, but it's not too late. She could still have that career, that life. Would you want that for her?" Rose gripped Jasmine's hand with surprising strength. "I stopped playing when James died. I thought music would hurt too much. But I was wrong." She looked directly into her granddaughter's eyes with the clearest expression she'd worn in years. "Music doesn't die with the people we lose. It lives on in the people we love." The moment crystallized into something perfect and profound. 3 generations bound by loss, by love, by the music that connected them across decades of separation. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. As they sat together in the afternoon light, none of them could have imagined what tomorrow would bring. An opportunity that would honor James's memory while finally giving Jasmine the chance to reclaim the dream she'd thought was lost forever. 6 months later, Jasmine stood backstage at Symphony Center Chicago, her grandmother's violin gleaming under the stage lights. The Chicago Symphony Orchestra's special evening featured emerging artists, and tonight, she would perform as their featured soloist, a full-circle moment that seemed impossible just half a year ago. Michael had used his business connections and considerable influence to arrange private auditions, but Jasmine's talent had done the rest. The music director had been speechless during her first audition, calling her performance transcendent, and immediately offering her a place in their young artist program. In the front row, Rose sat in her wheelchair beside Michael, her eyes bright with pride and clarity. The experimental treatment had worked better than anyone had hoped. While dementia still claimed some memories, music had become her pathway back to herself. She attended every one of Jasmine's practice sessions, offering guidance from decades of professional experience that gradually returned to her. "She looks like you did at 19, Michael whispered to Rose as they watched Jasmine tune her violin. "James would be so proud of both of you." Rose smiled, touching the locket at her throat. "He's here," she said simply. "In the music, in the love, in the family we finally found." The concert began with Pachelbel's Canon in D, the piece that had started it all. But tonight's arrangement was special. Jasmine had written new harmonies that honored the original while adding her own voice to the timeless melody. As the first notes soared through the concert hall, the audience fell into reverent silence. Michael watched his newfound family and felt his own grief finally beginning to heal. His divorce had left him feeling like a failure at everything meaningful, but discovering Jasmine and Rose had shown him that love could survive decades of separation, that family wasn't just blood, it was choice, commitment, and the willingness to start again. As Jasmine moved into the piece's crescendo, her playing reaching heights that left the orchestra struggling to match her intensity, Rose whispered something that made Michael's chest tighten with emotion. "James always said music was the bridge between what we've lost and what we might still find." When the final note faded into thunderous applause, Jasmine looked directly at her grandmother and uncle, her eyes shining with tears of joy rather than grief for the first time in years. She'd found her voice again, not just musically, but as part of a family she'd never known existed. The standing ovation seemed to last forever, but eventually, the curtain fell and the three of them found themselves alone backstage, holding each other in a circle of healing that had taken 35 years to complete. "What happens next?" Jasmine asked, still breathless from her performance. Rose smiled with the wisdom of someone who'd lost everything and found it again. "Next, we make music together. We honor the past by living fully in the present. And we remember that love, like music, never really ends. It just waits for the right moment to begin again." Michael nodded, understanding finally that success wasn't measured in dollars or achievements, but in the moments when broken hearts learned to sing again. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more. Thank you for joining us on this journey of love, loss, and the music that connects us all.